Shivaji Bhosle, liberator of the Maratha nation, 1627 to 1680. On the 10th of April 1627 was born Shivaji, the liberator of the Maratha nation. His father Shahaji Bhosle claimed descent from Sajan Singh, the grandson of the Rana Lakhman Singh of Chittor, who had fallen in defending his capital from the Afghan Emperor Alauddin Khilji. The Bhosles took their name from the family fief of Bhusawat in Udaipur. Sajan Singh immigrated to the Deccan, and his descendants became soldiers of fortune in the service of the king of Ahmednagar. Babaji Shivaji's great-grandfather became Patil, or headman of the village of Verol, near Daulatabad. His two sons, Maloji and Vithoji, founded the greatness of the family. Led, as they believed, by the goddess Parvati, they discovered in an ant heap a hidden treasure. Using it wisely, they equipped a body of troops and hired their services to Jagpatrao Nimbalkar, the ancestor of the present chief of Phaltan. Eventually, Maloji married Nimbalkar's sister Deepabai. Childless for some years, Maloji and his wife went on a pilgrimage to the shrine of a Muslim saint known as Shah Sharifji. The result crowned their hopes, and in 1594, Deepabai gave birth to Shahaji Bhosle, Shivaji's father. When Shahaji was 10 years old, Maloji conceived the ambitious design of marrying him to Jijabai, the daughter of the first noble in Ahmednagar, namely Lakhoji Jadhav Rao, who claimed descent from the ancient Yadava kings of Devgiri. Events favored him. He took Shahaji with him to celebrate the Holi at Lakhaji's house. Jijabai was present, and she and Shahaji began to mimic their elders and squirt red colored water over each other's clothes. Lakhoji, his heart warmed by the gay scene and attracted by the beauty and sturdy build of Shahaji, exclaimed, "What a fine pair they will make!" Maloji turned to the other guests and called them to witness that the boy and girl were formally betrothed. Lakhoji reluctantly agreed, but his wife strongly opposed the match. Eventually, through the mediation of Murtaza Nizam II, the wedding was celebrated. The marriage of Shahaji and Jijabai seems at first to have been happy enough. In 1623, she bore her husband a son called Sambhaji. Thereafter, so a legend runs, Shahaji was so engaged in fighting the Mughals on behalf of the Ahmednagar king that he found no time to pay his wife conjugal attentions. One night he dreamt that a Hindu anchorite, clad in rags and smeared with yellow ashes, put a mango in his hand and said, "Share the fruit with your wife, and you will be the father of a son, who will be an incarnation of the god Shiva." When Shahaji awoke from his dream, he found a mango in his hand, visited his wife, and shared it with her. The offspring of this reunion was the birth of a little boy. Convinced that the anchorite, whom he had seen in his dream, was the god Shiva, Shahaji called his son Shivaji, just as he himself had been called Shahaji after the saint Shah Sharif. In 1633, while Shivaji was still a little boy, an enemy of Shahaji named Mahaldar Khan deserted to the Mughals, then attacked Ahmednagar. Ahmednagar, and out of spite betrayed to them Shahaji's wife, Jijavi, Jijabai. They imprisoned her in Kondana fort, now known as Singat, but her servants contrived to conceal Shivaji. At last peace came through the partition of Ahmednagar between Delhi and Bijapur. Jijabai was allowed to rejoin her son, but in the meantime Shahaji had entered the service of the Bijapur state and had contracted a second marriage with Tukabai, a girl of the Mohite family. Jijabai would not share her husband with a second wife, so her relations with Shahaji became merely formal. In 1637, Shivaji was 10 years old, and the question of his marriage became important. Jijabai took him with her to Vijaypur. There he was married to Saibai, the little daughter of Vithoji Nevaskar. Shivaji, however, had been hunted during his infancy by Muslims. His mother had been imprisoned by them, and not unnaturally, he had conceived a violent dislike for them. He refused to bow to the king of Bijapur, according to the prescribed etiquette, and he made so violent a protest against the killing of cows that a riot ensued. Shahaji hastened to send Jijabai and her son back to his distant fief of Puna and Supa. To help her in its management, he appointed a trusted Brahmin officer called Dadaji Kondadev. Unfortunately, the fief was utterly desolate. In Shahaji's absence, armed bands of Muslim soldiers and of Hindu brigands had overrun the estate. The peasants had fled. The land had gone out of cultivation, and the village itself had been razed to the ground and the site up by a Mughal captain. Out of his own savings, Dadaji enlisted hillmen to guard the peasants, whom he tempted back. On the right bank of the Mulla river, where now stretches the municipal garden, he built home for Jijabai and her son. So well indeed did Dadaji administer the ruined property that Shahaji added to it the talukas of Indepur and Baramati, recently conferred on him by the Bijapur government. The rich black soil of the new lands soon repaid Dadaji what he had sent, and gave him besides a handsome balance for development. His financial difficulties surmounted, Dadaji gave his mind to Shivaji's education. Round the growing lad he gathered other boys of his own age, the sons of the petty landholders of the neighborhood, and bade them explore the folds of the Sahyadri mountains and the tracks that led through them, so that in the future Shivaji might know how to defend his inheritance. As a veteran soldier, Dadaji had Shivaji taught martial exercises, and as a scholar, he told him stories of the heroes of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. In fact, he cared for the young Maratha noble as if he had been his own son. Thus, at 18, Shivaji was a man tireless, fearless, and deeply inspired with the resolve to free his country from the rule of Bijapur. In the monsoon of 1646, Shivaji began his life's work by seizing the Bijapur hill fort of Torna to the southwest of Pune. It is a beautiful spot in summer and winter, but very dreary during the monsoon. A custom had grown up by which, during the rainy season, the commandant and his entire garrison left the fort for the village at its foot, returning at some date in November. Shivaji took advantage of this breach of discipline and occupied the fort during the commandant's absence and seized the garrison's arms and treasure chest. The commandant complained to Bijapur, but Shivaji used the plunder to bribe the court officials. He was nominated governor of the fortress, and his victim not only lost his post but received a reprimand. Shivaji's next step was to fortify Morbat Hill, 6 miles away, and rename it Rajgat. These two strongholds guarded the southwestern frontier of his fief, but its southern frontier could not be deemed safe until the fortresses of Kondana and Purandar were his. In the former, his mother Jijabai had been confined. Shivaji secured it by bribing its commanding officer and renamed it Singhat. Purandar became his through a lucky chance. The commandant had recently died, and his three sons were quarreling over the succession. They called in Shivaji as arbitrator. As he passed through the fort gates, the garrison tumultuously acclaimed him as their leader. He accepted the office and satisfied the claims of the brothers by lands elsewhere. Shivaji now owned four great fortresses, but he had emptied his treasure chest. This he had to refill somehow. Not long afterwards, he surprised the treasure train of the Muslim governor of Kalyan. It is a wealthy town near Thana, and the treasure was proceeding under armed guard to Bijapur. Rich once again, Shivaji took by storm no less than 9 forts to the west of Pune and occupied Kalyan itself. The indignant king of Bijapur ordered Shivaji to present himself at court. The young rebel replied that he would do so if the king conferred on him all the lands in his possessions. The Muslim courtiers insinuated that Shivaji was merely his father's tool, although Shahaji had really written to his son a letter of censure. The king, through the treachery of another Maratha noble, Bhaji Ghurpade, arrested Shahaji and ordered him to be bricked up in a wall. A small aperture was left open so that he might breathe, and he was allowed to send word to Shivaji. If the son failed to surrender, the aperture would be closed and the father would be suffocated. Shivaji met the situation with consummate skill. He offered to become a feudatory of Shah Jahan. The Mughal emperor grasped eagerly at the chance of meddling in Bijapur affairs and ordered Shahaji's immediate release. The Bijapur court at once freed Shahaji from his brick prison, ordering him not to leave the capital. They did not, however, overlook Shivaji's conduct. They induced Balaji More, Raja of Jaoli, to connive at his assassination. The plot failed, and Shivaji, after vainly attempting to win over Balaji More, attacked and took possession of his fief and treasure. With this new wealth, he fortified a neighboring hill, which he named Pratapgarh. In the meantime, Shah Jahan's third son Aurangzeb was vigorously attacking Bijapur, and Shivaji, having declared himself a Mughal feudatory, joined the prince's army with a contingent. Before any decision could be reached, the emperor fell ill. Prince Aurangzeb abandoned the Bijapur campaign and hastened north to fight for the throne against his brothers. Shivaji, left alone to face the wrath of Bijapur, tried to seize their naval base at Janjira, but failed. Encouraged by his enemy's repulse, the young Bijapur king called for volunteers to destroy the rebels' growing power once for all. The queen's brother, Afzul Khan, who knew the country round Jaoli well, asked for the command, promising to bring Shivaji back a prisoner. Made commander, he desecrated as he marched the Hindu temples that lay along his route. At the same time, he bragged openly that he would bring Shivaji back in a cage of wicker work that he had prepared for the purpose. Shivaji's spy, Vishwasrao Korekar, overheard this boast and warned his master. When Afzal Khan entered Jauli limits, he sent his secretary Krishnaji Bhaskar to lure Shivaji to a conference. For all the secretary's silver speech, the young rebel distrusted Afzal Khan's proposal. That night, he secretly visited Krishnaji and implored him, by all that the Hindu held sacred, to disclose the Khan's real intentions. With great reluctance, Krishnaji at last confessed that nothing but treachery was in his master's mind. Armed with this information, Shivaji resolved to turn the tables on his lying enemy. He agreed to meet Afzal Khan on the slopes of Pratapgarh, but under his tunic he put on a coat of chain mail, under his turban a steel helmet, and concealed a dagger in his sleeve. To his left hand he fitted steel points, known as sagnak or tiger claws. In the meantime, Afzal Khan marched vaingloriously to the foot of Pratapgarh hill. Thence he was carried in a palanquin to the meeting place, where Shivaji had put up a reception tent. The two commanders, attended by only two orderlies each, met inside the reception tent. As Shivaji appeared to be unarmed, Afzal Khan thought that his chance had come. With his left arm, he caught Shivaji round the neck and tried to drive his sword into the Maratha's stomach. The coat of mail turned the point. Shivaji, unable to free his neck from the Khan's powerful grip, drove with his right hand his dagger into Afzal Khan's back and tore open his belly with the tiger claws in his left hand. Afzal Khan broke away and struck a mighty sword blow at Shivaji's head. The steel helmet under the turban broke its force. Nevertheless, he received a slight cut on his head. Afzal Khan's attendants tried to help their master, but they were overpowered and the Khan was seized and beheaded. At the same moment, Shivaji's soldiers fell on the unsuspecting Bijapur army and completely destroyed it. The news of this disaster merely roused the Bijapur king to fresh efforts. A second force under Siddhi Johar, an Abyssinian mercenary, marched to avenge Afzal Khan. Shivaji occupied Panhala, but it was invested with such strictness that he was in grave danger of capture. With great skill, he slipped from the fortress and made his escape to Vishalgarh. The place was impregnable. Siddhi Johar was relieved of his command, and the Bijapur army retreated. Shivaji thought this a favorable moment for punishing Baji Ghorpade for his treacherous arrest of Shahaji. Ghorpade was moreover very hostile to himself. With 3,000 men, he stole one night out of Vishalgarh, surprised Ghurpade, and killing him returned laden with booty. Bijapur was in despair. Shivaji was unconquerable, and always the Mughal peril threatened from the north. At the same time, however, Shivaji was menaced from the same quarter. Shahaji, intensely proud of his son's achievements, offered himself as a mediator. Father and son met at Jejuri, a celebrated Hindu shrine, and together they rode to Pune, where they negotiated a treaty. Shivaji was left in possession of his conquest. In exchange, he promised to aid Bijapur against foreign aggression. At Shahaji's advice, his son moved his capital to the great fortress of Raigarh. Safe from attack by Bijapur, Shivaji planned to free the Marathas under Mughal domination. About the same time, Aurangzeb directed Shaista Khan, the governor of the Deccan, to take active measures against the new power in the south. Shivaji, driven from Pune, retired to Rajgat. There he planned to raid on the Mughal general. 200 picked soldiers, disguised as a marriage procession, obtained leave to enter Pune. There they were met by 500 others, disguised as Mughal infantry. That night, with Shivaji at their head, they raided Shaista Khan's residence, killed his son and most of his servants, and slashed off his thumb. Thinking they had killed the Mughal captain, the Marathas dispersed and escaped to Singhat. The disgusted emperor replaced Shaista Khan by his own son, Prince Muazzim. The latter's inactivity gave Shivaji a chance of carrying the war into the enemy's country. He hid his movements by a pretended attack on the Portuguese province of Bastacin, on the frontiers of which he erected two large camps. Then suddenly on the 5th January 1664, Lai appeared before Surat with 4,000 picked cavalry. The Mughal governor made no attempt to defend the town, but withdrew his garrison inside the castle, leaving the town to the invaders. Unmolested, the Marathas collected or dug up the property and jewels of the rich and timid Gujarati merchants. Only the English factory resisted them successfully. On January the 10th, hearing of the advance of a Mughal relief force, he loaded the treasure of the unfortunate inhabitants. on their own horses and ponies and brought it safely to Ragda. Shahaji had been killed hunting during the raid on Surat, and Shivaji assumed the hereditary title of Raja, conferred on him by the king of Ahmednagar. He felt deeply his father's death, but he was at once called on to face a new Mughal army, led by Jai Singh and Diler Khan, two skillful and experienced veterans. Diler Khan invested Purandar while Jai Singh blockaded Singhat. Shivaji, fearing a simultaneous attack from Bijapur, sued Jai Singh for peace and eventually obtained it on the rendition of all his recent conquests from the Mughals and of all the territory that had once belonged to Ahmednagar. He was allowed to retain his gains from Bijapur and allowed a free hand against that state. In return, he was to visit Agra and do homage to the Emperor Aurangzeb. The emperor, however, had no intention of keeping the treaty. Directly Shivaji appeared at Agra, he was publicly insulted and given a lower place than that to which he was entitled. Eventually, he was detained in a bungalow on the outskirts of the town. From this prison house, he escaped with extraordinary skill and acuteness. He hid himself in a brickwork basket, especially made for sending sweetmeats to friends, and then rode as fast as he could to Mathura. There he and his comrades assumed the garb of anchorites and made their way to Benares, Allahabad, and Gaya. Thence they turned back and travelling through central India arrived safely at Pune. Shivaji's young son Sambhaji, who had been left at Mathura, was able to join his father some months later. Not long afterwards, Bijapur, Delhi, and Shivaji entered into a threefold treaty of peace. The treaty remained unbroken for 2 years. Then Aurangzeb ordered his son Prince Mozam, the new governor of the Deccan, treacherously to seize Shivaji. The prince, however, liked the Maratha and warned his agent at Aurangabad. Shivaji acted on the warning and was soon out of reach of Mughal treachery. On the advice of his mother Jijabai, he retaliated by retaking the great forts of Singhat and Purandar. The former was escaladed by his lifelong friend Tanaji Malusre, who fell in the undertaking. The latter was stormed by Tanaji's brother, Suryaji. The king tried, but failed to capture Shivner and Janjira, and then again turned his attention to Surat. Once more he took valuable plunder from the Gujarati merchants, and on his way back to Rajgarh defeated a Mughal army sent to intercept him. These successes followed, as they were by further inroads into the crumbling kingdom of Bijapur, led Shivaji to have himself formally crowned at the hands of a Benares priest. He enjoyed indeed the hereditary title of Raja, conferred on his grandfather Maloji, by the king of Ahmednagar, but that kingdom had ceased to exist. He had been confirmed in the title by the emperor, but he had finally renounced his fealty to the Mughals. He had therefore no real dignity to raise him above the level of the well born and high spirited nobles who shared his campaigns. On May 21st, 1674, and on the succeeding days, he had himself crowned with splendid ceremonial at his capital, Rajgat. He was invested with the sacred thread by Gagabhat, a high priest of Benares, and anointed after the manner of the ancient Kshatriya kings. When Shivaji had been duly installed, he had himself weighed against gold coins, which he distributed among the Brahmins, who had flocked to see the great king's coronation. On the following day, he received an embassy from Bombay. The English merchants there were anxious to have their rights admitted by a regular treaty, and they claimed with great firmness compensation for losses suffered by them from Maratha raids on their factories or branches at Rajapur and Hubli. The English were led by Oxenden, who presented a diamond ring and received in return a robe of honor. The king granted the English 10,000 pagodas for their losses at Rajapur, but refused their Hubli claim. He allowed them to trade in his dominions on paying 2.5% duty, to build trading factories in Rajapur, Dabhol, Chaul, and Kalyan. He also agreed to let English money circulate throughout his territories and to restore all English ships wrecked on his coasts. Shortly after the coronation, Shivaji's mother Jijabai died to his great sorrow. He sought distraction in a second attack on Shibnir, where she had given him birth. Failing again to take it by storm, he determined to conquer the great stretch of southern territory that Bijapur had acquired on the break-up of the Vijayanagar Empire. It was no mere land hunger that prompted him, but a full understanding of the danger that threatened him from the north. He realized that once Aurangzeb brought against him the full strength of his empire, he would be lost unless, by retreating to the extreme south, he could so lengthen the enemy's line of communications that Lai could face their fighting front with some chance of success. The plan was born of statesmanship and executed with triumphant skill. Under pretense of going to Tanjore to claim his share of Shahaji's estates, he marched across Bijapur to the eastern coast, paying for his supplies as he went. There he formed an alliance with the king of Golconda, and then turning southwards he conquered not only Tanjore but the whole south as far as Mysore. It was this magnificent campaign that later enabled his descendants to keep at bay and finally to overthrow the whole strength of the Delhi Empire. The last years of the great king were embittered by the turbulence of his eldest son Sambhaji. After reducing Bijapur to helplessness, Lai resolved to protect it from the renewed Mughal attack. After winning an important battle at Sangamner, he had returned to Panhala. There he learned that Sambhaji had deserted to the enemy and had been received with the greatest courtesy by the Mughal commander Diler Khan. Aurangzeb, who always distrusted his subordinates, ordered that the prince should be at once sent to Delhi. Sambhaji escaped and returned to Shivaji, who imprisoned him in Panhala. The king then forced the Mughals to raise the siege of Bijapur. And at the invitation of the king, Sikandar Ali Shah went there in state. In 1680, Shivaji, angry at the help given by the English to the Mughals, ordered his admiral to destroy the shipping in Bombay. But his fleet was no match for the English vessels. The Revenge sank 5 gunboats of the enemy one after the other. This was Shivaji's last important military effort, for on the 28th March 1680, on his return from a raiding expedition, a painful swelling appeared on his knee joint. Fever followed, and after a 7 days' illness, the great king died at Raigat on the 3rd of April 1680. I shall close this monograph by quoting the just and admirably chosen words of On in personal activity. He, Shivaji, exceeded all generals of whom there is record. For no partisan appropriated to service of detachment alone ever traversed as much ground as he at the head of armies. He met every emergency or peril, however sudden or extreme, with instant discernment and unshaken fortitude. The ablest of his officers acquiesced in the eminent superiority of his genius, and the boast of the soldier was to have seen Shivaji charging sword in hand.